Good morning, everyone. Sandra, would you start us off?
Sorry. Welcome to First Unitarian Church, where our mission is to explore the eternal, nurture community, and pursue the common good. We welcome you in your brokenness and in your wholeness. No matter what you have been, who you are, or who you are becoming, we greet you today with love.
We light the chalice as a symbol of our sacred time together. The burning chalice represents the light of reason and science, the warmth of loving community, the cleansing heat of justice, and the flame of hope.
Well, this is a special kind of service today. We're here at the church because none of the staff members on the worship team has power at home. And I know that many who would normally be attending the service aren't able to because they also don't have power and may not for many more days. But we felt it was important to be here together today, even if virtually, because this day is so heavy with meaning and emotion. Today is Samhain, a sacred day for witches, Wiccans, Druids, and other modern pagans throughout the Northern Hemisphere. It's a time to honor and work with the ancestors, a liminal transitional time, a time for healing and remembering. It also happens to fall on a full moon this year, a blue moon, no less. In the Christian tradition, this is All Saints' Day, All Hallows, a day to honor the most blessed saints who have passed on to paradise. In Mexico, this is the day of the little angels, Dia de los Angelitos, when the spirits of deceased children are reunited with their families. In all of these traditions, this is a time to honor and to converse with our dead, a time to celebrate our connections to those who have passed beyond the veil. But this is 2020, and the numbers of recently deceased can be overwhelming. Over 230,000 COVID deaths in this country alone. And beyond all these deaths related to the coronavirus, we have lost so many pillars, so many great trees this year, including beloved members of our congregation and national heroes. So here on this Sunday before the most important election in our lifetimes, we find ourselves surrounded by our ancestors, those who left this plane long ago and those who are only very recently departed. May we listen to them and find strength in their message. Instead of an opening hymn this morning, I'd like to share a musical meditation with you. This is Reverend Dr. Kiyama Rahman reading from her work, It Is That Time and That Place, accompanied by Tana Davis on piano. This work was commissioned by the First Unitarian Church of Chicago.
This next piece, I wrote it back in, I believe it was 2005. My youngest daughter was in her first year of law school. She called me in the middle of the night in a complete meltdown. We spoke for over an hour. When I got off the phone, this is some of what I captured and some of what I added that I didn't say to her. It's titled, It Is That Time and That Place. Now is the time to call on the memories of the ancestors who thought they could not walk another step toward freedom, and yet they did. It is that time and place to call on the memories of the ancestors who, when the darkness of their lives threatened to take away the hope and light, reached a little deeper and prayed yet another prayer. It is that time and place to remember those who came through the long night to witness another sunrise. It is that time and place to remember the oceans of tears shed to deliver us to this time, and bowed backs, the fervent voices asking, begging, and beseeching for loved ones sold off. Time to remember their laughter and joy, though they had far less and little reason for optimism, yet they stayed on the path toward a better day. Time to hold to the steadfast hands and hearts and prayers of the ancestors that have brought us this far. Time to make them proud and show them and ourselves what we are made of. And that their prayers and sacrifices and lives were not in vain and did not go unnoticed, nor have they been forgotten. Did you not know that this day would come, that we would have to change places, that just as our ancestors were delivered, that you would also be delivered? Have you not seen the greatness and power of the creative energy in the universe called God, that moves and has its being through human agency? Have you not seen God in your neighbor's faces, in the homeless, in the battered woman, the trafficked child, the undocumented worker, the dispossessed? It is that time and that place to know that it is our turn, that we must leave a legacy for our children and all the children. It is that time and that place. We are the ones we've been waiting for, and for that, let us be eternally grateful.
Thank you. That was beautiful. So before I get started with our Time for All Ages today, I've got a quick question for you. Who here realistically believes they can change the world? So who realistically believes they can change the world? Wave at your screen for me. All right, I see some waves, some not waves. I think your answer may be different by the end of this story. So today for our Time for All Ages, we're gonna start with a video, actually. In fact, I think this video can show all of us how we can change the world. And all it involves is a simple little wooden square. So let's watch this video together from Stephen Morris on YouTube. Thanks, Reverend Anna, for the tech help today.
Everybody knows about playing with dominoes, but what you may not know is that a domino can knock over another domino, which is about 1.5 times larger. So what I have here is a chain of dominoes. Each one is 1.5 times larger than the previous one. And the smallest domino is about 5 millimeters high and 1 millimeter thick. And I will carefully place it. And there are 13 dominoes. And the largest domino, it weighs about 100 pounds and is more than 1 meter tall. Ready? Boom. That was 13 dominoes. If I had 29 dominoes, the last domino would be as tall as the Empire State Building. Here we go. What's the physics going on here? Well, every time you stand up a domino, you lift it against gravity. And that stores some of gravitational potential energy in the domino. And you only have to put in a little bit of push to get it to that tipping point. And then you get all that energy back again when it falls over. And that's more than enough energy to knock over the next domino, which releases even more energy. So it turns out the amplification in this series of 13 dominoes is about 2 billion. So we put in a little tiny bit of energy at the beginning, and we get 2 billion times as much out at the end. But of course, we put all that energy in by lifting these dominoes and standing them up again. So that's a kind of chain reaction. You trigger it, and more energy comes out, and more energy is released each step. Let's see it in slow-mo.
And thanks to Stephen Morris for putting together that, I find adorable YouTube video. So how many of you have ever played with dominoes, standing a bunch on end and knocking them over? I know I have. But how many of you realize you can knock over a domino that weighs over 100 pounds with just one little itty bitty domino? One domino can knock over another domino 1.5 times bigger than itself. So to me, that's pretty incredible. It takes just one domino falling to set up a chain reaction that can knock over something hundreds of feet high. And it all started because of one tiny little domino. So I think this shows how we can all change the world. It takes just one small change to potentially set off a chain reaction that can literally move the world. And it can start with the smallest step, the smallest action from the smallest among us. One little tiny action can get amplified over and over again and lead to a bigger change than we ever thought possible. So sometimes in my life, it feels like I can only knock over the tiniest of dominoes. I'm sure a lot of people here feel the same way. We can only move a small part of our own lives, address some small injustice. But if we knock over that tiny domino, make just one small change, it can get amplified over and over again and do amazing things. So now, who here believes that you can change the entire world? Let's get another wave of hands. All right, I see some more hands waved. That's good. Because we all can. Because we can all make one small change, and who knows what will happen if we do. So I want all of you, especially the children and youth here today, to think about one small change you could do to change the world. Maybe it's always recycling. Maybe it's taking reusable grocery bags to the store. Maybe it's just turning off the lights when you leave the room once you have power again. Maybe it's being nice to the new person at school and smiling at them when they look scared online. Maybe it's inviting that kid in your new class to chat or play together. We can all make one small change because we can all change the world. So what's one small change you can make right now that might just start a chain reaction? Go ahead and think about it for a minute. And I invite you to share them in the chat during the service, or during the next few minutes of the service at least. One small change you can do that might start that chain reaction. Who knows how big of a domino some of these small changes might be able to knock over? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. It was great. And Sandra Flansburgh is our worship associate today. And even though Sandra also has no power at home, she is here with us this morning to share a reflection. Thank you, Sandra.
Good morning, and greetings to you from the offices of American Choral Directors Association, where there is power and internet. Reverend Diana asked me to reflect on civic engagement this morning. And that has been a welcome focus over the course of this week. Something positive to think about in the midst of what seems like one challenge after another, and another, and another. But this task has helped me focus on the important things because I believe that civic engagement is needed now more than ever. And I think we are witness to that in these difficult times. My faith has a lot to do with being connected to all living things and trying to live a life that's reflective of that. It matters what we do and don't do, since our survival depends on that of our neighbors, all of our neighbors. I love one of our UU mantras, love is our doctrine and service is our prayer. In a hugely challenging year like this one continues to be, I found it bearable in large part because of the people I've come into contact with as a result of the civic engagement work I'm involved with. Some of those people share a similar sense of purpose from their different faiths, and that centers me in the reminder that we are all connected, even though we are all different. I'd like to share a few snapshots from the last couple of weeks. Voice organized 11 notary events throughout the Metro in October to notarize absentee ballots, but also to help make copies of IDs and in general to shine a light on voting. I helped organize 2 events in our 525 building's parking lot with our church's team, and here are some of the people I met doing that. One of Suzanne Broadbent's childhood friends, Sherry, drove in from Western Oklahoma for both events to help provide notary services. She said she just wanted to be of service and to relax with a crowd that wasn't rabidly pro-Trump. She alternately regaled us and horrified us with the stories of trying to be a Democrat in rural Oklahoma. One young man motored up on his motorbike saying that he had tried to get a couple of his friends to notarize his ballot, but they kept wanting to know who he was voting for, and he didn't want to share that information. We just notarized his ballot. Senator Kay Floyd came by for about 30 minutes because she saw us out there and turned around to come and thank us for providing that service. She asked how many people had come by at that point, and when we told her, she shared a story about early in her political career when she lost an election by 35 votes. It was then that she learned that every vote counts and that every vote must be counted. One of our newer members, Carol Storr, drove down from Edmond with her ballot and told us that she mostly drove that far because she and her husband are new to the area and to the church. She has been coming to the virtual services and to Alliance online meetings, but all of that since the building has been closed. She wanted to meet some of us in person and got to see the outside of the church building for the first time that morning. My daughter Catalina and I went to a very different Souls to the Polls yesterday, all outside and fully masked, but no less energized because of that. It was so wonderful to hear the Reverend Jesse Jackson from East 6th Street Church talk about voting as an act of resistance, one that was long fought for and one that people who look like him are increasingly having to fight once again. I looked around the crowd and realized that there were a number of people there who probably helped fight for that right 50 years ago and are seeing it slide away again. What an honor to be there and to have the civic action of young people also lifted up by the speakers there, raising the acts of civic engagement of multiple generations. The message from so many of the people there was that about civic engagement and how it can never end. When a right is fought for and achieved, then the fight continues to keep it and to try to keep moving forward. Representative Kendra Horn spent a long time talking with Catalina before we started the march over to the county election board. She was so excited to hear that Catalina is already an engaged and experienced voter at 19 years of age. She was especially excited to hear that Catalina is active in encouraging her group of multiracial young friends to register and vote as well. So as you see, I get way more back from the engagement than I will ever be able to give. And it's experiences like those that make my life better and more positive. And I think we all need big doses of that these days. Blessings on all of you for all the ways that you stay active and engaged.
And our congregational president, Ingrid Young, is going to invite us to the offering.
Good morning. I'm so glad to see so many people here. I'm Ingrid Young. I'm this year's president of the Board of Trustees. Every Sunday, we take an offering. All the cash and designated checks from that offering go directly to external nonprofit organizations doing good work in our community, our Change for Change partners. This month, our Change for Change partner is Free to Live Animal Sanctuary. Free to Live is a nonprofit sanctuary for stray, abandoned, and mistreated dogs and cats. It's the largest no-kill sanctuary in Oklahoma. While we listen to the offertory, you may wish to make a donation to our Change for Change partner using a credit card through our website. Or this could be a good time to find your checkbook, write out a check, and put it aside to mail to First Unitarian tomorrow morning. Let today's offering reflect our highest aspirations for the work of this church in the world.
Thank you, Ingrid. And the music that we'll hear during the offering is From a Distance by Julie Gold, performed by Tom Balcom, Lana Henson, and accompanied by Warren Palmer.
From a distance, the world looks blue and green, and the snow-capped mountains white. From a distance, the ocean meets the stream, and the eagle takes to flight. From a distance, there is harmony, and it echoes through the land. It's the voice of hope, it's the voice of peace, it's the voice of everyone.
From a distance we are happy now, and no one is in need, and there are no guns, no bombs, and no disease, no hungry mouths to feed. From a distance we are instruments marching in a common band, playing songs of hope, playing songs of peace. They're the songs of every man. God is watching us, God is watching us, God is watching us from a distance. From a distance, you look like my friend, even though we are at war. From a distance, I just cannot comprehend what all this heart is for. From a distance, there is harmony, and it echoes through the land. And it's the hope of hopes, it's the love of loves, it's the heart of every man. It's the hope of hopes, it's the love of loves. This is the song of everyone. And God is watching us, God is watching us, God is watching us from a distance. Yes, God is watching us, God is watching us, God is watching us from a distance.
There we go. Thank you so much to Tom and to Lana and to Warren and to Nathan for helping out with recording and making that video for us. I'm going to do something now that I almost never, ever do, which is recycle a sermon. Uh, this is a sermon that I gave, or based on a sermon that one of the first ones that I gave here in this pulpit. And I've decided to do this, yes, because I've been sick and haven't had power. But I'll tell you what, I also was thinking, what do I want to say today? And I realized I've already said it. So I'm just going to say it again. In 2008, I was living in Iowa City. I was glad that I had the opportunity to participate in an Iowa presidential caucus. I'd never lived in a state with a caucus before, and I was intrigued by what felt like a throwback to Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington style civics. It was January 3rd, and in a college town that had mostly shut down over the holidays, it felt like a perpetual 6 a.m. Everyone seemed groggy, and the whole world felt like it could use a cup of coffee. The temperature had hovered around 10 degrees all day, and it was on its way down to 0 as I walked down to the elementary school that was my polling place. I checked in at the door, got my instructions, and found the room where all the people supporting my favorite candidate were gathered. We were in what must have been a first grade classroom because all of the chairs were very, very tiny. A college student came in and counted us and reappeared sometime later to tell us that there weren't enough of us. Our candidate hadn't made the 15% cut. So we had 30 minutes to decide if we wanted to join a viable candidates group, merge with another non-viable candidates group to make the candidate viable, or basically take our ball and go home. And this was when the discussions started. Friends walking across the room to talk with friends, strangers quietly chatting among themselves, people precariously using those tiny little desks as platforms to convince us to switch to their candidate. And at the end of the 30 minutes, our little group separated and merged into larger streams. I walked into that gymnasium where another candidate supporter had gathered. It was a decent sized group to begin with, but it just kept growing and growing. I saw my neighbors. I saw people from work who I liked and respected. I saw people I couldn't stand. And there we all were, crowding into this gym to be counted. So many of us kept flowing in that we had to line up and be counted at least 5 times. And at the end of the 5th count, it was clear. This Black man from Chicago, who wasn't much older than me, had swept in my precinct. And people on their cell phones were reporting in that we were not alone. When the counts were finally deemed official and we were free to go, we all spilled out into the bitter cold and crystal clear night. There was chatter and laughter and people patting shoulders of people they didn't know or otherwise couldn't stand. Someone drove by honking and waving a flag and singing the national anthem at the top of his lungs. And it felt so good. It wasn't so much that a particular candidate had won. It was how it had all happened, with decency and positivity and people talking with one another. Well, that was more than 12 years ago. And it's been a long time since I've felt that way. Taking the place of the optimism and belief in our democracy that so many of us felt back then, even if we were on different sides of the political spectrum, is what we've seen in recent years, especially during the days and months leading up to this fateful election. The entrenchment of power in the hands of a privileged few, targeted oppression of the marginalized, attempts to restrict and curtail the ability of people to vote, the intentional sowing of doubt about election processes and democratic structures and principles, and most significantly, a resurgence of deep national and personal trauma, fear, and hatred. So much hatred. With COVID added into the mix, and with an ice storm that has left hundreds of thousands of us without power, it can feel as though we are living in the end times, if we believed in the end times. It certainly can feel apocalyptic, or at least like we are living in a terrible dystopian science fiction movie. At a time like this, it seems only natural to despair, to fear the worst, that corruption and hatred will win the day, that the final nail will be hammered into the coffin of our democracy. Even in the best case scenario, we have to wonder if there will ever be any way to heal the deep divide in our country. Will we ever truly be one nation, one people? Well, it's at times like this that it can be helpful to remember that other cultures have been through similar crises. There's a hymn we often sing here at First Unitarian. Like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come build a land, my people we seek. The words for that hymn come from Hebrew scriptures. The book of Isaiah, chapter 61, quote, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me. He has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and release to the prisoners, to comfort all who mourn, to give them a garland instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning. They will be called oaks of righteousness." Unquote. Now, this part of the book of Isaiah is believed to have been written sometime after the leaders and prominent citizens of the kingdom of Judah had returned to Jerusalem after being exiled in Babylon. For decades, the prophets had dreamed about returning to the holy city, and now they were back. And as the people became accustomed to their new reality, they fought and they bickered. And those who were already powerful grew in their power at the expense of others. And in their despair and frustration, some people rejected the values of their community, and they resorted to old ways of thinking and behaving. This was a time when good news, comfort, and the binding up of broken hearts were sorely needed. The author of these passages was calling out to the people to rise to their better natures and to stand like oaks of righteousness. But why oaks? We know that oak trees are often used as symbols of quality like strength and endurance. The wood of the oak is strong, hard, and resistant to insects. But there is something else about oaks that makes them particularly resilient and enduring. It has to do with acorns. Oaks, like other hardwood and nut-bearing trees, have over many millennia developed a way to ensure their continuation as a species. They do this through something called masting. In what's known as a mast year, all the oaks over a vast area will synchronize their acorn production and produce an unusually large number of acorns. Some individual oaks can produce up to 100,000 acorns in a single mast year. So many acorns at one time overwhelm the squirrels, birds, and other animals that like to eat this hard fruit. They can't possibly eat such an abundance of food. So many acorns are left to grow into new oak trees. Now, of course, this strategy only works if all of the oaks over a very large area, over many hundreds of square miles and more, work together. Survival over the long run only works if all the oaks are unified, functioning as one for the good of the whole. Going back to Isaiah and the fractured nature of the Judean society, it becomes clearer why the prophetic author of the text would call for the people to stand together like oaks of righteousness. And couldn't Isaiah's oaks teach us a lesson for now? Because we also face infighting and bickering, prejudice, oppression, and the effects of greed, as well as the return of ugly elements from our past that at least the more privileged of us thought at one point we had overcome. Given the magnitude of climate change, the pandemic, and massive corruption, and the rise of autocracy, not just in this country, but in countries around the world, it increasingly seems that this will be a losing battle unless we are able to come together on a grander scale than has ever been seen before. As Reverend Dr. William Barber points out in his book, The Third Reconstruction, this is exactly what the beneficiaries of racism, sexism, greed, and corruption most fear. And it is what they have most actively and intentionally worked to prevent by instilling into our cultural mythology a sense of scarcity and zero-sum thinking. Reverend Barber points out that after the Civil War, during the period of Reconstruction, white and Black alliances controlled every state house in the South. Fusion coalitions built the first public schools, incorporated labor rights and social welfare into state constitutions, expanded access to the ballot, and brought new fairness into the criminal justice system. But within 4 years, what Reverend Barber calls the immoral opposition had effectively put an end to this progress by organizing the KKK to terrorize the Fusionists and by raising the worry that there could never be enough public resources to support so many programs. If anyone was going to have, they argued, some must have not. Through an intentional process of divide and conquer, the immoral opposition managed to hold fusion resistance at bay. The same pattern of progress and backlash was seen after the second Reconstruction, the Civil Rights era. And Reverend Barber believes that we are experiencing the birth pangs of a third Reconstruction today. But given the entrenched hatred and the toxic partisanship that we're seeing in our country, is a new Reconstruction even possible? Is it possible for groups of people to work together anymore across races and classes, gender identities, and religions? Well, Dr. Barber believes so, and I think it's possible. We've seen it happen with the fusion politics of the Moral Mondays movement, where people have come together across faiths and races to fight against some of the most regressive legislation in decades, and in many cases, to win that fight. We've seen it with the Poor People's Campaign, which has united tens of thousands of people across the country to challenge the evils of systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, and ecological devastation. And right now, leading up to this election, we see a diverse coalition of liberals and conservatives, Christians, Jews, Muslims, humanists, Unitarian Universalists, and people of all races and ethnicities coming together to fight injustice and to defy the attempts of the powerful to fragment the united movement through fear-mongering and jaded appeals to so-called Christian values. We are living in a time when the enemies of equality and justice for all seem to be legion. And even if they're not, they have managed to appear bigger than they are by gathering at rallies and shouting together. Like the people of ancient Judea, who were called by their prophet to stand like oaks of righteousness. We are called to cross the boundaries of religious and cultural and racial difference. Like the oaks in a mast year, let us stand together to inundate our adversaries, not with acorns, but with love. Imagine if we could produce so much love all at one time, that there would be no way for all of it to be countered with hate. No way for all of it to be consumed by despair. No way for all of it to be eaten up by fear and anger. So let us all together be like those oaks of righteousness, overwhelming hatred and injustice with our shocking bounty of love. Last week, we lost so many trees here in Oklahoma, and there is still so much devastation and loss. For me, the ice storm was both a natural disaster and a metaphor for all the other losses we've experienced this past year. So many deaths of so many beloved friends and heroes. So many great trees have fallen. Yesterday, I went outside and walked around the trees outside the church, and I made this short video. I'm outside by the tree that we planted on our 125th anniversary. As you might be able to tell, it's taken some blows. Some of the branches are hanging down at odd angles, but it has survived. It's going to make it, just as we will. I want to offer up first a reading and then a prayer for the trees. This poem is by Maya Angelou, and it's called When Great Trees Fall. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forest, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks
never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nature, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be. Be and be better, for they existed. Please join me in a spirit of prayer. Spirit of creation, today we thank you for the trees. What miracles they are. The lungs of the world, they breathe out the oxygen we need to live. The arms of the world, they hold and nurture insects, reptiles, mammals, and birds. The memory of the world, ancient groves speak of ancient times, and new trees planted remind us of recent losses. The backbone of the world, their trunks and branches become our boats, our homes, our fences, our furniture. The womb of the world, they grace us with their fruit. The heart of the world, they inspire us, they calm us, they whisper to us secrets we can only understand with our hearts. The mind of the world, they speak a language and understand a truth that exceeds our feeble comprehension. So thank you, trees, for all that you give to us, for all that you are. But as mighty as trees may be, they are also fragile. Fire burns them, tiny insects devour them, lightning incinerates them, and even water, when it turns to ice, can tear them apart. Trees remind us that nature is both the life giver and the destroyer. What may stand for hundreds of years can snap in two and be reduced to firewood in just a moment. So thank you, trees, for reminding us of our own greatness and our own vulnerability. Spirit of creation, today we mourn for the trees. So many that we planted, nurtured, pruned, and cared for. So many that were never cared for by human beings, but grew strong and beautiful all the same. So many that we knew like our neighbors, like our friends. So many that gave us shade, that sang to our hearts on a summer evening. So many now lie wounded and broken. The sound of chainsaws fills the air like a great mourner's howl. The sight of branches hanging like so many broken arms. The stomach churning echo of limbs snapping in two. For all of this, we grieve. Spirit of creation, today we pray for the trees. May those that can bounce back from this devastation do so, resilient and supple. May those that lost branches but are still able to recover, may they pull strength from their roots and bud again in the spring. And for those that cannot be saved, may they live on in their children trees, in the warmth of fire, in the nutrients of their decaying roots and leaves, and in the memory of their shade and their songs. Blessed be the trees. Blessed be all beings. Blessed be the cycles of life and death. Blessed be.
One of the great trees that fell in this past year was John Lewis. And for our closing hymn, I'd like to play a piece based on some of his words. This is by Harmony Grisman, and it's called John Lewis Says.
Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Never be afraid to make some noise. Stay hopeful until you die a day, and we can find a way out of no way. Yeah, we can find a way out of no way. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Never be afraid to make some noise. Stay hopeful until you die a day, and we can find a way out of no way. Yes, we can find a way out of no way. We can find a way. We can find a way. We can find a way out of no way.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of love and community which burns in our hearts.
Thank you. And I have as our benediction today a traditional Irish blessing. Blessings on all of us. Be well, be safe, and we dream of a day when we'll all be together again in this space. It will be. And that video isn't working, and that's absolutely fine because I have the words here too. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. Until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of God's hand. Blessed be. We will have our virtual coffee hour, so go grab your coffee, warm up if you need to, and come back and join us. We'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.